Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow podcast hosted by Allison Turner. In each episode, we interview real, everyday entrepreneurs to learn how they got their start, what challenges they faced and overcame when starting the business, and what successes each has had. Welcome to the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow podcast. My name is Allison Turner. I am your host. The purpose of this podcast is really to demystify the entrepreneurial journey, because so often we see on Facebook and social media these sponsored ads of start a company and get $1 million in 1 year. And while there are a few people that can do that, for sure, most of the population cannot do that. And so it's really, buy my program and I will teach you how to get that $1 million the first year. A lot of it is taking step by step and slowly growing a company to really build it to that extent or further. So it's not that it's not possible, but maybe not in that short of a time frame. Today we have with us Jeff Perlman of CDS Holdings. But he's done many different pieces in his life. So I thought he's a great example of the entrepreneurial journey because of all the different pieces that he's been involved with over time. So first question, which is going to be a little more of a general question, is, I know you've run, I know you're a writer. I know you've done productions like, magazines and things like that. And it seems to be you seem to be out of most of those at this point, from what I've seen. So how did you get involved, I guess, from that side of things into CDS Holdings now?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a loaded question. So my career has not been really planned. So I can't really say, do this, and this, and you end up here. I've kind of been a little bit all over the place, and it's worked out well, but it's not a traditional step-by-step journey. There's been a lot of side streets that we've taken. So I started off as a journalist in newspapers. Then I split off from newspapers and started my own newspaper, and then a magazine. And then I got into local politics, and which is a whole other story. And then as a result of being in local politics, I met some folks. And one of the gentlemen that I met along the way was Carl DeSantis. So, and it's interesting because I spent about 3 minutes with him. I was in office for 7 years, and I met him at a charity function for 3 minutes. Somebody pointed out, there's Carl across the room, you should go and say hello. So I did. Seemed like a nice guy, but it was a 3-minute conversation. And then I got term limited. I left in 2007, and the phone rang one day, and Carl had called and had wanted me to help him with some of his real estate holdings that he had a bunch of stuff, everything from game preserves in South Africa to ranches in Texas and a bunch of stuff locally to kind of make sense of what he's doing. And he just wanted my perspective for some reason at the table. And we developed a relationship from there that then he had asked me when that assignment was over. He had asked me if I would join his beverage company. He had bought a controlling interest in Celsius, and he offered me a position as chief operating officer. So, here you go from like a newspaper reporter to a local politician to Atlantic Ave magazine, and next thing you know, like you're sitting in a beverage company office, and I know nothing about beverages. So, but I've learned to say yes, especially to the things that frighten me. And not that it's easy to do that, but there's a lot of learning along the way, and there's a lot of growth. So I encourage people to listen to what they're kind of afraid of and then go for it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen, right?
In most cases.
In most cases.
In most cases.
In most cases.
I know that's funny that Frank McKinney and I talked about that same thing and said, that if you don't have that fear, more than likely your life is stagnant.
Yes.
And you're not doing anything at that point. So if you don't have some kind of fear, now he did say, there are fears that you want to listen to, and he referenced something for himself, which he did. But he said most of the time, he's a little bit more of a daredevil anyway, and would do things that I certainly wouldn't do, like light himself on fire and things like that, and skydive in or parachute in, or all the different
climb a water tower to propose to your wife.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Certainly things I wouldn't necessarily do, but he pushes through those fears.
Absolutely.
And so it's funny that you brought that up.
Well, Frank and I grew up sort of together in this town. I mean, as young people, I'm from Long Island, Frank's from Indiana, but I was working for the newspaper when he was just getting involved in real estate. So I did a lot of stories on Frank because he was really setting the market everywhere he went. Mm-hmm. And first it was in Bankers Row, and then he moved to the Ocean and put price tags on houses that were like, these are Palm Beach price tags.
Right.
How is this going to work in Delray? And damn if he didn't get them. He got those prices. And I helped a little bit on the thinking of his first book. Okay. And one of those principles were, exercising your risk muscle. It's like a muscle. Mm-hmm. And so if you build up that tolerance for taking some calculated risks, not crazy risks, he does some crazy risks.
Oh, huge.
That there's payoffs. So I kind of, I think, internalized that and started to say yes to some things that I used to say, well, maybe someday. Well, you know what? I'm gonna start saying yes now.
Right. So with CDS Holdings, I know you had the meeting with Carl and I guess some of his team members, and you were offered this position, but you said it was kind of out of left field, and you really didn't have the background in that.
And I told him that, and he was very insistent. I later learned that about him, that he kind of he is not an analytical businessman. He is very much an entrepreneur using his gut instincts, and his gut instincts are good, especially for what will work in the marketplace. He has a knack for knowing what the consumer wants, and he has a good nose for people. He has a lot of really good people on his team, and throughout his career, he's attracted and kept a lot of really great people. So he says, don't worry about it. I will resource you. You're a reasonably smart guy. You'll figure this out, and I'll help you. And I thought, the world is collapsing in terms of the economy. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I think I went in there with a lot of questions and left with, well, I have an adventure I'm going to go on. And I think he's a good bet because he's a good guy. And I thought the brand was interesting and had a lot of upside potential. It was right in Delray. So it was just so compelling. And I said yes and had a lot of butterflies. And it was really an interesting adventure, and completely out of left field, that things you don't expect in your life.
Right. But I think the one thing, so even though you're working for CDS Holdings, so you're not necessarily owning the company per se, I think the one thing I want to emphasize is, you have that kind of heart of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And where you're taking risks. I mean, I think so many people don't have that to begin with. So coming into an entrepreneurial journey may or may not be for them. Because you'd already done, I think anytime you run for office, public office, that's like a journey and an entrepreneurial journey to begin with, just because you have to figure out, how to get everyone to get along, how to, make compromises, and, how to, finesse delicate situations and whatnot. And I think that's a lot of what entrepreneurship can be in owning a company, when you're dealing with employees and decisions and all that type of thing. And so you had all the skills of entrepreneurship. You'd obviously, owned parts of magazines and things like that and done all the writing. So you had all those pieces
I've always been entrepreneurial in terms of my spirit and my mindset. So even when I was working at a newspaper for a large company, I pitched them new products and became at first what they called, the term at the time was entrepreneur. So they let us do a couple of publications within the company. We partnered with them, so we had ownership, but we were still in the fold. That experience prompted me to start my own company. And I did that for a number of years. We had education publications, and then that morphed into Atlantic Ave magazine. So that's always been that drive to create something and take some reasonable risk and try some things. And even politics, we had a saying back on the city commission that I was on, and I was on from 2000 to 2007, that we wanted to be civic entrepreneurs, that it was possible to be entrepreneurial in government. Not that you would take crazy risks with taxpayer money, but we would try some things. And we realized that, in local government anyway, most of your mistakes are not fatal. If we can learn something that we could be applied to something else, that was a success. And we may stumble on some things, we may pivot, but let's think like entrepreneurs and let's not be a slow-moving bureaucracy. Let's try to innovate. And I think that's the heart of entrepreneurship. And when you can infuse that into an organization and make everybody in the organization feel like they got a piece of that they're entrepreneurs within a larger operation, it benefits everybody because you get some innovation. I mean, that's the only way to kind of get somewhere, make some progress, do something differently. And I thought we were kind of hitting it pretty good. And we had a lot of cities coming to Delray to look at what we were doing in terms of downtown revitalization, race relations, reinventing the parks, various things, arts garage, cultural plans, coming to see how you're doing that. And really it was unleashing people's creativity, which is really at the heart of entrepreneurship.
No, I think that's very true. And I think, like the other thing I can speak to, because I lived here during that time, although I was probably less involved than I am now, because I was working for someone else at that point, actually in Boca. So I wasn't as involved in downtown and the city politics. I mean, I always went and voted, but and did kind of my research around that, but I wasn't kind of connected to key people and didn't follow it on social media platforms. I don't even think I was on social media at that point.
I don't think they had social media.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
But, I think coming from that standpoint where you can, if we make a mistake or that we learn something from it, because that's such a huge piece in entrepreneurship. People that either take it personally, they made a mistake, or maybe one of their team members made a mistake or something happened, then maybe you shouldn't be in entrepreneurship because you have to be able to, use that to your advantage down the road and learn from it and then improve upon it.
And know that you're going to make mistakes, and as long as we don't repeat the same ones.
Right.
Let's talk about what went right, what went wrong, and what can we do going forward, and it's okay. And we find in terms of like a bureaucracy, and I think even in a private sector company, people get fearful. If and not that I'm against accountability, but you don't want to make people fearful because a bureaucracy will freeze up because it's easy to do nothing. You don't get in trouble when you're not making any decisions. You can't get away with that in the private sector. You have to be making decisions. And it's okay. It's okay if we're going to stumble here and there. This is a human business, as long as we're not making the same mistake over and over. Right. And that takes a while to kind of get that into the culture, and people need to see that you mean what you say, and your heads aren't going to roll because it didn't go off exactly as planned. So that's an important kind of thing to inject into any organization, I think.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I know coming from that, you also wrote a book, which you're holding right now.
Yeah, this is my shameless plug. So I wrote this book a couple years ago and just recently updated it, and it just came out again. So and I added a chapter on COVID and some of the changes that have happened in local government since I left, which seems like such a long time ago. And when you look at technology, we didn't have social media in the early 2000s. So we were dealing with email. My predecessors were dealing with like snail mail. So now I can't even imagine what it's like to be a public official dealing with all the misinformation and crazy stuff that goes on social media. So this was the book that I was looking for when I was in office, because you run for office, because you love your town, and at least that was my motivation. I didn't want a career in this. I just wanted to make a difference in a town I loved. And then you realize, okay, now that I'm here, where's the playbook?
Where's the manual?
Where's the manual? There is no manual. And so I was looking for this book or a book that would sort of talk about some of the things we were encountering. How do you deal with, how do you get things moving in government, which tends to be slow? How do you deal with, opposition? How do you bring people together in a polarized environment? How do you work with your colleagues? All these things. I never found the book, so I decided I would write it as best I can, based on what I learned not only in Delray, but observed across different cities, because I started to really fall in love with just cities and study different places that I admire what they were doing. So I distilled some lessons, and hopefully it's helpful to anybody that's interested in local government.
Yeah, and
you don't have to be a politician.
Right. Sometimes it's better not to be a politician.
Most times it's better.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
I think you got into it for the right reason of, you loved your city and you wanted to kind of give back to the city and help it move forward. I think some people, and I'm not even going to speak for the city of Delray, but just in politics in general, some people get into politics, I would say many people get into it for the right reason, but then somewhere along that journey, it gets corrupted or misconstrued or something happens, because all of a sudden, the message they were delivering on what they were running on is completely different than what's happening out in the real life.
I have a theory on that, Allison, and that I believe that giving someone a position of power, an elected office, it could be a CEO position, is really like an MRI. So it's going to reveal who you are. So if it's going to reveal your strengths, it's going to reveal your weaknesses, and we all have strengths and weaknesses, but it's going to reveal your character at the end of the day and who you are. And we see that time and time again. Power reveals. And so, it's so important to have people that are in it for the right reason. Like if you start with Why, one of my favorite books, if you're in it for love of community, if you're in it for, not to make a career out of it or for just to have power over people, that is a good place to start. And if you're not, it's going to come out.
In your actions and how you speak, all that type of thing.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that directly ties to entrepreneurship, because you hear people that start companies, because their friend had this company and it's super lucrative and they made all this money, and they start the same type of company, whatever the industry is. They really have no desire to be in that industry at all. And they come from it for the money side, and then the company fails because they don't really have a passion behind what they're doing. And I think you have to come from a place of, service of, who are your clients? How are you going to better their life, their business, whoever, whether it's consumer or business, how are you going to improve that person or improve that business? And then, the money comes as a result of that.
It does. It can't be just for the money.
No.
Because that also gets revealed, and it's not a sincere reason.
Right.
And I think people have a sixth sense about that, particularly consumers. it has to be, you touched on it beautifully, it's passion. Because there's, there glory and riches and fame and fortune are far from guaranteed.
Right.
And it's very, very hard. And there are easier ways to live than to be an entrepreneur. And I think about Celsius, which is, I tell people it was a 12-year overnight success story because it was such a slug and so many times where, we weren't sure if we had the money. We got into stores, it didn't sell, the product came back, you have to pay for the product to come back. It's a lot of heartache along the way. It's not just, a hockey stick of growth.
No.
And, but it's that belief that, we all kind of had a passion for this brand, and Carl had an incredible belief in this and was willing to keep us afloat even when I think most people would have said, okay, I've had enough fun with this. He just believed in it, and eventually it broke through.
Right.
And then when you do break through, that's another challenge because, complacency can be a killer.
Yeah, everyone's gunning for you.
Everybody's gunning for you, and you don't want to rest on your laurels. You want to continue to innovate
Right.
and continue to be fresh. And there's so much competition today. And that's, that's good because it keeps you sharp. And my dad, who was a small businessman, he had a pharmacy. He taught me to wake up a little scared every morning. And it sounds odd, but, and it's not because he wants you to walk around fearful, but his point was, even when you're doing well, think about what could go wrong, and try to protect yourself as best you can. Nobody has eyes in the back of their head, but you can never kind of rest on your laurels. You can't be complacent. And I think that goes for any business and any endeavor. Even relationships, you can't be complacent in that relationship just because, okay, we've been together, we're committed. Well, no, we can't be complacent. We want to grow.
Right. No, I think that's absolutely true. And I mean, the one thing I heard in there is, you said Carl DeSantis had a lot of belief in the products, maybe more than some of the team had, when you kept trying to push it through, and I didn't even realize it started in Delray Beach. So I missed that part of the journey altogether. But, and I think that's the other thing in business. You have to have belief in, whether it's yourself, your product, your service, and keep that as an unwavering belief, and whatever you're going to do to achieve that, especially, if you're a small business, obviously, he's built up quite the large business, and this is one piece of a much larger picture, but for someone starting out or someone, I think that's the biggest thing I can, and I talk about that in different videos as well, because I find that mindset is such a huge factor when someone starts a business, because if you don't have that, it's probably not a good idea for you to start a business, or if you aren't willing to work on it. I guess that would be more my key piece is, you have to kind of continually work on yourself, work on, keeping your mindset at a high level. That doesn't mean you don't get down in certain things or anything like that, but it's how you bounce back. I mean, my favorite quote from Charles Swindoll is, what is it? Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
And part of it's leadership too. And cultivating a culture where it's inevitable that you're going, somebody's going to be feeling down. So does the other teammates pick them up?
Right.
It's not everybody is on the same level at all at the same times, but you got to be kind of emotionally intelligent and aware of where your team is, where you are. So there were, most of the time, Carl was, where this is going to work. I believe in this. And we had somebody to look to, and they're like, well, you know what? He's had success and he believes in this thing. Seems a little crazy because it's not selling, but he believes in it. And and we believe in him.
Yeah.
So that worked. But then there would be times where, even he got a little frustrated here and there. I had many a dinner with him where it was, what are we doing here? And then I would try to pick him up a little bit, and others would try to pick him up.
Uh-huh.
And so you kind of work with each other to make sure that you stay on some sort of even keel. Mm-hmm. Because I think either extreme is probably not the greatest thing. You don't want to get too low, and you don't really want to get too high either. So you want to keep that even keel and understand there are potholes everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, and the beverage industry is such a huge competitive market.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's worse every day because someone comes out with this new drink that does whatever.
Yep.
0 sugar, 0 calories, great taste, I mean, energy drinks, vitamin drink, I mean, whatever you want in your whatever, whether it's soda, water that's flavored,
One of the great lessons we learned, you hit something that I forgot about, but we were everything for a while. We were a calorie burner. We were a healthy alternative to soft drinks. We were an energy drink. We were something you mixed with alcohol. The Celsius Cola
against that healthy section
goes well with the rum,
Yeah.
So we were everywhere. And then you kind of realize that the consumer, it's hard enough if you can plant one message,
Yeah.
but when you're pitching 20 messages and you went around the office and everybody you talked to had a different answer of what we are, that's a problem. So we actually went and spent an afternoon with Jack Trout, who is considered the father of positioning. He's since passed away, but he had a winter home in the Sarasota area, and he wrote what's considered to be one of the top 10 business books of all time. I recommend it for any entrepreneur. It's about positioning. And he seized on that right away, went around the room. He got 8 different answers as to what we were. And he says, this will not work. You have to find a positioning and stick to it. And that's where the whole fitness and being your fitness partner and Live Fit came out of that afternoon with this genius business thinker. And so sometimes I think it's a good advice for an entrepreneur to get out of that circle that you're in all the time and go outside to an objective source to get some information.
No, I think that's so true because because positioning is part of that branding side. And if they're confused about the brand and the brand message, then they're probably not going to buy, whether it's a product or a service, they're not going to buy it because they don't understand what it actually is. If one person thinks it's this and they're really looking for this, even though you say that in your message, but they hear this over here, then they're not going to purchase it.
No, it's impossible.
I mean, it's almost, to me, it's
so
better
crowded.
to niche your message down. So many people are like, oh, anyone could use whatever, whether it's a drink or service or whatever. And like, anyone can have it. I'm like, yeah, but we need to figure out where, because we do, branding it back at Media Group and, but who do you want to, who is the actual avatar? Because so many people are like, well, everyone can use it. I'm like, no. Everyone's more than likely not going to use it.
Right. And find your tribe.
Right.
And deliver value and be true to that value.
Yeah.
And it helps. I thought it helped bring clarity. So it's like, okay, we're not going to be mixing this like Red Bull does. So we're not going to be hitting the bars to try to sell Celsius into the bar scene. We're about health clubs. We're about helping a mother get through the day. We're about somebody who wants some extra energy when they go to the gym. That's it. It just made it so clear. And even like on the magazine, we're a hyper-local magazine, so we're not going to cover national people. Right? Everything's localized, and to stay in that lane. And we're local to Delray. We're not local to Boynton or Fort Lauderdale or something else. It's really helpful.
Yeah. No, I think it makes the message so much clearer, and then it also it dictates everything else moving forward. I mean, it dictates your marketing strategy. It dictates the business. I mean, everything. Because if you know what you're marketing now you know which, if it's social media, what social media platforms you need to be on. Where are these people that I'm going after? You know exactly what the messaging is, or you can create the messaging now that's not like this long, it's this long, so it's more succinct, it's more to the point, and get it across much more quickly.
And you can figure out where your audience lives, so you can reach them, begin to talk to them, instead of, to your point, trying to talk to everybody. It's that's expensive. It's not the most efficient. And so, when people ask, well, what turned the corner? I think it was coming out with some clarity there, and then having a leader like Carl buying into that and saying, okay, let's go. And when you hear that go from your leader, it's very motivating, very motivating.
So how quickly after you had that meeting with Jack Trout did you see an increase, an uptick in sales?
It still took a little bit of time,
Right.
but it started to, it's a new pitch to customers, to distributors, to consumers. It's, so it takes a while to get that kind of into the bloodstream.
Right.
But that was a turning point, and it started to go from there. And that's huge. It's really huge. And I've seen that with, some of the local entrepreneurs. You talked about Frank McKinney. He defined himself. He didn't start off on the beach.
No.
But then he ended up on the beach, and he didn't go to Lake Ida. He didn't go to Tropic Isle. He stayed on the ocean. He didn't even do the intracoastal. So that required some vision as to what he was doing. And I am the guy to do the beach, and it became that personal brand, which, it's been pretty good.
No, yeah, I think it's been very good.
Yeah.
And now it's so good that he's coming back into it after
There
retiring for whatever, a year or how many ever months it was that he retired from it for.
He's coming back.
Yeah, I was like, it's not going to last.
Too young.
Yeah, too young,
too
too
young.
many houses to
Too much
imagine.
knowledge. Too much knowledge.
Exactly.
And I think that's another thing for entrepreneurs, that if you're lucky enough to have success, I think there's do I go and retire now? Or, I just don't really necessarily believe in that. I think you have, more in the tank. You should try other things. You can mentor people, you can teach, you can write, do something. Not, sort of take your marbles and go, off somewhere to.
So off into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have that option, but I think, how entrepreneurs are wired, they kind of need that in their life. They need that, reason to get up in the morning and test themselves a little bit. Back to my guy Carl, he's going to be 83 in July.
Okay.
And, he's not coming to the office too much, but he's still coming into an office. He still has an office. He didn't have to have an office. He could have retired in 2000 when he sold Rexall Sundown, the vitamin company. And he didn't. He went, he sold the company on a Friday and opened up the CDS on a Monday. And next thing you know, you're in 15 businesses, because that's just who he is. And it's not about the money. It's about the challenge, about solving a problem, about testing yourself. And I think that's what I admire so much about entrepreneurs, period, that they're the ones that kind of move society forward.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work out.
Right.
But when it does, even the failures are interesting. Even the failures.
No, I think it's so true. And I mean, I think you hit on a couple of things there. I mean, so one is, you said, even if they want to retire, mentoring other entrepreneurs. So, we see that sometimes, and you referenced, when you hired Jack Trout, which wasn't necessarily a mentor, but someone to consult with, CDS Holdings. I think having that outside opinion is so valuable. So whether it's, if you're a small, just getting started, hiring a business coach, or finding that mentor that's in your industry, and also realizing those people change over time. So as you grow, what you needed when you first started the company may be completely different of what you need when you hit, say, $1 million mark, because you're at a completely different part of the journey at that point.
Absolutely.
And so the same business coach or the same mentor may specialize in this piece, but may not specialize in this.
I'm a big believer in coaching. I'm glad you mentioned that. I've had coaching along the way from formal and informal mentors. I at one point, in order to actually finish my book, I went to a coach to get me through the book, because even though I've been a writer all my life, and I've written articles, the thought of writing a book, 150, 200 page book, was daunting to me, and I needed help.
Right.
And she helped. So I believe in that. I don't think anybody is a success on their own. There's a lot of authors to success. So I think you take advantage of all the coaching you can get. Call people up that are smarter than you. Don't be egotistical. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, and learn from them.
And surround yourself with people that's smarter than you. What is that? That's like a Napoleon Hill type of principle of you're the sum of like the 5 people in the room with you.
Yeah, and don't worry about credit. It's another good one, because again, there's many authors to success, and failure can be lonely, but nobody can. It's everybody else's fault.
Right.
But
exactly.
But it's crediting people, trying to build a good team. I think it's more fun to succeed when you're working with people. Then I wouldn't want to be in a room somewhere by myself. I like to collaborate, and I like to learn, and I like to surround myself with people that can teach me something. Hopefully I can teach them something too. Right. But that learning, just committing to learn something, I try to do it every day, but certainly you can do it every week, whether it's reading something, listening to great podcasts. There's time if you prioritize that, and it's time well spent too, because it really pays dividends. Yeah,
I think, and essentially, learning to me is like essential in entrepreneurship. I mean, because things change, whether it's industry things for your specific industry, and obviously continuing to be on top of those pieces is crucial and critical. I mean, so in the online marketing world, things change like all the time. And, Google says one thing and it's, it's like the Federal Reserve coming out with something and everything gets affected, all around it. So it's Google's like the Federal Reserve of online marketing.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, they changed their algorithm and all of a sudden, the website that was on page 1 now is on page 4, and something shifts, and you have to be on top of what those changes are if that's part of a service that you offer.
I think the one thing we can all count on is change. Growing up, I wanted to be in newspapers. If somebody would have said newspapers would eventually be dying, really, are you kidding me? We get 2 delivered to the house. Every city in America had 2, 3. The large ones could have up to 4 newspapers, right. A morning paper, an afternoon paper. I can't imagine a world without newspapers, and they've been around for 200 years. Yeah. Well, here we go. You can count on disruption. So everything you do, I think it's going back to that wake up a little bit scared in the morning. That here, my dad, a retail pharmacist, had that kind of insight. That, and by the way, it was nothing but retail pharmacists when he came out of school. There was no Walgreens, or they were not everywhere. And they were trained to go operate their own businesses and be their own entrepreneurial pharmacists. That went away. So it's a lot of disruption. So, and you could be negative about that. As I know a lot of people I talk to all the time are, I can't handle, it's too crazy. Or you could look at it and say, let's surf the wave and let's figure out a way. Because I think the other key to being successful in entrepreneurship is that resilience.
Yeah.
You have to be resilient.
Yeah, I mean, resilience and knowing that change comes and being able to adapt quickly and kind of see it. I know my cousin's husband, and this is like my second cousin, so they're in their, I think, late 70s, but he owned a bookstore in Wellington Mall, and I haven't really talked to him about this journey, but I saw when he sold it, and he really sold it, when Amazon was coming online with their thing, and then things were going a little bit more towards the online market. Barnes & Noble was still huge, and I can't think of the other one that now that doesn't exist any longer.
Borders.
Yeah, Borders. That's the one. I was like, it starts with a B. Was huge, and my sense is he probably saw some of the writing on the wall, and instead of waiting, and kind of going down in the flames, he chose to, get out at that point. And I mean, I think, and I always hear people are like, Amazon's destroying everything. And I mean, whether you like Amazon, hate Amazon, whatever about Amazon, they're here to stay. And obviously Bezos is continuing to innovate Amazon on taking over, the next piece. I mean, he's got Whole Foods now. I'm sure he's going to go into something else that we aren't aware of yet that
He's got a lot of ammunition to go after things. But I think that's a good point. And my father sold his business when we had our first child, and he came down here, and there used to be a chain called Farmore. And we went out to buy some stuff for the baby. And every time I turned around, my dad was missing because he was looking at their shelves. And then he came out. He's like, they're selling at retail. I can't even buy this wholesale for this price.
Yeah.
And then he said, I'm a dinosaur. And then he decided to sell the business, and he was still in his early 50s. It took a year or two to do that. So you have to kind of see the writing on the wall and be realistic. Or you can, come back and try to figure out, how do I reinvent the local bookstore?
Right. Innovate it a different way.
Do I add a cafe? Do we bring in speakers? So there's
wine.
wine or whatever it takes. But I have a joke with my wife that everything that I love has been disrupted. So like, I love magazines. They're really struggling. I love newspapers. They're struggling. I loved record stores. I spent so much time in going through record bins because I love music. Well, the albums are gone,
Right.
Vinyl's coming back a little bit, but it's never going to be like what it was. And all my songs are now on my phone instead of in milk crates that I still won't throw out, by the way.
Yeah, we got some of those too. So.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Courtesy of Jack over here. So.
I'll be ready. So things change, and they change now so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, and I think with the metaverse and all that's coming forward, because I'm starting to kind of look at that in the digital marketing world of how that's going to impact the business. Are people going to start advertising? Well, they already are advertising up there. So I shouldn't say up there, but out there, whatever you want to call it. And how do you tap into that early? Do you what's the best way to take advantage of that? I mean, I think that's and that's a whole different conversation, which I don't have any answers for as of yet. But
it's a commitment to continually reinvent.
Yeah.
So even like retail, like just as a category, because we're involved at CDS in some real estate investment. Well, retail is challenging. I mean, how do you compete with Amazon in physical retail? Well, so what's popular now is experiential retail. So you have to kind of program your center so that there's concerts or there's events coming on to bring people there and give it a sense of place and kind of get people off the ease of one-click purchasing.
It shows up like the next day or sometimes same day.
Yeah, sometimes it beats me home. I order it at work. So it's interesting. And I think it's kind of exciting in many ways. Just who knows what the next 10 years is going to bring.
Right. I mean, it's going to be interesting in 10 years to see where everything is, because I'm sure it's going to be completely different. And who knows if retail, I know it's going to exist in some way, shape, or form, but who knows how closely it will be, kind of what it looks like.
We'll probably be trying on things in the metaverse to
Yeah.
see how they look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know my stepdaughter bought her prom dress and shoes all online, I don't know through what store, but all online. And I'm like, now, mind you, the shoes were killing her feet, so maybe that wasn't a good choice in the shoe market, but she seemed to nail the dress pretty well. But like, I've never been able to buy clothes or shoes or, unless it's just a t-shirt, something that's not really form fitting. But this was like full length, form fitting.
That's brave.
Sequin.
She's brave.
Prom dress. And, obviously she got it much less expensive than she would have paid had she gone into a retail store here. Especially around prom, because a lot of times the prices sometimes go up in that arena at that time.
I remember when Zappos came out, I'm thinking, who's going to do this? Who's you grew up going to a shoe store. There was actually a salesman that measured you, and you walked around the store, and your mother signed off or not. And now you're ordering something online, and how do you really know how it's going to fit? And yet it was a great success that Amazon ended up buying. And it, kind of changed the game. So it's a very interesting time.
Yeah. No, I think the change is, as we've been talking about, the change and being able to adapt to change. So if you don't like change, maybe entrepreneurship is not a good thing for you. Or work on yourself first, personal development, and, make sure you are good with change and adapting to change. Because I think it's always...
That's the constant.
It's always changing.
Yeah,
and you have to always be thinking, especially as a business owner or someone higher up in a company, you have to look at the 30,000 foot view and say, okay, here's today down, over here, but where do we want to go, at the end of this year and in 3 years or 5 years? And what are the pieces that are going to need to play in, and then even if you map that out somehow, and once something shifts and changes, you may have to zig over here or zag over here. Absolutely. Because what you thought was going to be here, it's never a straight path.
Never. That's the one thing I think you can be sure of, that what your business plan, which I believe in them and I think they're very important. And but I've never seen one, because we do some investing as well into local companies. I've never seen one that didn't change, that there wasn't a pivot somewhere, because you run up against something that you need to figure out. And I think that's part of the joy of entrepreneurship, if you look at it that way, as an intellectual exercise, that how do we make that shift and how do we find success. But you could rest assured that change is always constant. It just and it keeps you on your toes. And I'm amazed at how connected we all are, even to, this, what's going on in the world. No one saw COVID coming.
No.
And it changed everything. No one saw 9/11, and right after 9/11, everything changed. Travel changed, security changed. How we feel about certain, places that we have to go, the airports and all these things have changed. And nobody saw any of these things coming. We get through a pandemic, and now there's a war, and that changes the economics and supply chains and energy prices. So it's a constant sense of change. It could get you down if you look at it in a negative way. And I'm not saying any of this is positive. It's not.
No.
But you have to be resilient. And you have to kind of, put your head down, and we're gonna get through this. It may take a little longer, but we're gonna get through it because we believe in our mission, and I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, and I think it's so true, because we saw so many businesses go out in COVID during the last 2.5 years, and either they didn't shift quickly, whatever that business was, or innovate enough, or they didn't have the funds, backing up, or they didn't go after the government funds that were available early on, relatively early on, once they became available. I heard several different ramifications of that. And clearly some got hit more, like the restaurant industry, and ones that had that face-to-face service where they were shut down for a longer period of time and then had very strict guidelines in place. I mean, even in our state early on, there were stricter guidelines, and then they loosened more quickly than some other states like New York and California, which were shut down a little bit longer. So I understand some of those, maybe couldn't survive just because, there was a much longer period of time. But there were certainly ways that I know restaurants here, innovated and were able to, do takeout very quickly. Even before they, if maybe they hadn't done that much takeout before, or they hadn't marketed their takeout before or something. And I know, John Brewer was great at innovating and helping out with, creating the supper club and helping to bring the restaurants to light. And so they're not just lost in, because a lot of times when crises happen, people look at how it's affecting them and not necessarily the community. They're looking at, oh crap, some people lost their job, or how's this, if you're a business owner, how's it affecting my company? Or, oh, my friend's sick in a hospital, or, all that was, and not to say that's you definitely want to do that for sure, but they weren't necessarily looking outward of like, okay, how's this actually affecting our community as a whole? And what's gonna, how can we help, retain companies and keep them here? Because obviously if a bunch of things close, that doesn't help your town either once things open up, because now you've got all these vacancies and whatnot. So,
it was interesting because, and I have a lot of respect for what John Brewer did, and my neighbor Ian Patterson was involved early on in the supper club. But just the mindset of not thinking about themselves, but also, understanding that they needed, that there was a community at stake here, and how powerful a message that sent, and that the industry is pulling together. When we talk about entrepreneurship and business, it's often in a competitive framework. That's my competitor. That's another Italian restaurant we got to compete with. But in that case, people came together as an industry to help the owners of the restaurants, the restaurant workers. Everybody was suffering, the supply chain, and that was kind of impressive to see that can happen. And it's a great exercise. I saw that after 9/11 with people coming together to sort of help each other emotionally through a very tough time. So it's important and especially not to be alone as an entrepreneur, to not feel it's you against the world, that there is a community out there rooting for you, that there is a shop local ethos out there that people want to buy into. It's all important. It sends a great message. That was very powerful.
Yeah, and I think it does. So as we start to wind down today, the final question I'll ask is, if you could say one thing to someone that wants to start a business, and it doesn't have to be in any particular industry, just the entrepreneurship journey, that maybe you learned through, owning different businesses and even working in a business now, what would that be? Like, if it was one thing that you either wish you'd learned earlier in life, earlier in your journey that would have helped, or something that maybe you didn't learn early and that really propelled your success early on?
That's a great question and not an easy one, because it's hard to narrow down to one. But if I had to pick one, and I do like to follow the rules, so I'm going to follow the rules. I would say go for it, not to be driven by fear, to be driven. Don't let your fear overcome your dreams. And I'm not saying to risk it all and risk your house and your family, but start. Even if it's a small and what you would think is a modest start, it's a start. And you don't want to be an old guy on a porch wondering, gee, I wish I had the courage to at least try. What would have happened if I tried? And so I've learned to say yes to some things that were out of my comfort zone and kind of figure it out along the way and not worry about knowing everything in the get-go. It'll come to you, and surround yourself with good people, but start and don't let fear drive your life. It's very real. I'm not saying, you'll get rid of fear,
No.
but you can even harness it as a positive thing where I'm going to do this. I'm going to feel proud because I overcame it. I'm going to protect myself because I am fearful of losing money or whatever is important to you, but don't let it stop you. So that would be the one thing.
I think that's so important because I see so many entrepreneurs and that's kind of the name of this is Dream, Plan, Start, Grow. And that's also my business coaching program is running under that name. And they may be great at the vision, which is a dream. They may be great at planning, or at least writing down a plan. But when it comes into the start piece and putting things in action, that's where things fall short, which means obviously the grow piece isn't going to work if you don't start. And, doing small steps each and every day is more critical than taking one huge step, in 1 week and then not doing anything for the next 3 weeks because you took that one big step and then, doing another big step. So I'd rather see someone take little steps each and every day and be consistent with those.
Yeah, it builds.
Yeah.
It's one step at a time, and it builds, and understand that there'll be a misstep.
Yeah.
More than one along the way, and that's okay. And what did you learn from it? But it's so important to start. Just to start is a really it's a bigger deal than you would think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if anyone wanted to get in touch with you with any just kind of questions, I know you don't necessarily have your own, well, maybe you do have your own website, I don't know. But
I have a blog I do every Monday.
Okay.
It's at yourdelrayboca.com. So that has my writing and just thoughts on life and leadership and things in Delray. I could be reached through that. I could be seen around town, I guess. So just come up and say hello. I'm more than happy to help you in your endeavors. And I want to thank Allison. I think what she's doing is fantastic, and spotlighting people and coaching people and encouraging them to dream. It's really important. So you're doing important work.
Oh,
and you're doing it
much.
well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So if you are out of the area where you can't just come up and say hello to them, then go to your Boca Delray.
Your Delray Boca.
Delray Boca.
Delray's always first.
Yeah, sorry. Don't want to say that.
Boca.
yourdelrayboca.com. And there's a way to get in touch with Jeff there. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was very, very interesting. I learned some things I didn't know about you, for sure. So my name again is Allison Turner. I am the host of the Dream, Plan, Start, Grow podcast. We love working with startup companies and companies that have maybe started but hit that plateau where they don't really know where that next step is, early on. Because I think sometimes I shouldn't say it's easier to start, because that's not always easier for many people, but sometimes people get started, but then they get to a certain level of success. Maybe they've earned that 50,000 and it's just them, but they want to go to that next level where they can hire people, and 50,000 isn't going to cut it to hire anyone, and they don't know what to do, because maybe this is covering it for them, but to really move forward, they don't know that next step. So if you ever have any questions for myself or my team, you can reach us at success@dreamplanstartgrow.com. All of our podcasts are on that website, dreamplanstartgrow.com. And I also do a weekly Clubhouse mastermind on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And anyone's welcome to join that. So we have a different topic each week. And right now it's a little smaller group, which is great because more people get the opportunity to come up on the stage and speak and share. And, I feel like we can learn from each other. So I'm certainly not the expert on everything. I always like other people's, opinions on what we're talking about. And I learn from other people, and hopefully just as much as I'm impacting other people. So thank you for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Dream Plan Start Grow podcast with Allison Turner. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Join the Dream Plan Start Grow community by following us on Facebook or Instagram at Dream Plan Start Grow. See you in the next episode.